to show you how I get started over here in Lightroom. Then we'll go over to Photoshop and do a few other things over there. This is the original image that I took right out of the camera. As you can see, it's kind of centered in the middle of the frame. It's a little overexposed, and there's some things sticking in from the side, or from the top and the bottom, and the color in the background is kind of distracting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the history panel over here to show you the things that I've already done on this side of things. So as I said, this is the original raw file. And the first thing I usually do when I process these things and try to bring the highlights back a little bit. So that's basically taking the slider over here on the right hand side and pulling it all the way over minus 100% to bring this back. Now it would have been nice if I had exposed it properly, but it's always difficult when you've got a light object on a dark background. So thank goodness for the highlights and the shadow slider in Lightroom, so that we have that capability now. Now I could also have used a little bit of, probably gone down in the exposure, and that probably would have changed things a little bit too, but let's follow through with what I used over here. I actually increased the shadows a little bit because I was still trying to get this darkened up a little bit. And the shadows, when you use the shadow slider, it only darkens the dark parts, which is good, because if you use the exposure, that would darken everything. So that's the advantage of having those highlights and those shadow sliders, because they only work on shadows and highlights. The next thing I did was I increased the contrast a little bit, and this darkened the background somewhat and also richened up the colors a little bit on the flower. And I actually took that contrast up about plus 24. Then I gave it a little bit of clarity just to see what it would do. Not much, plus 10, that's not a whole lot of clarity. And then I started cropping. I don't use the normal sizes of the photo frames or your normal framing sizes. Back in the day, and I still can do it, I am a custom framer, and so I don't worry about custom, the same old sizes, the 8x10 and 11x14 and all those good things. I crop my image to match the picture that I want, what is the image that I'm trying to create here. And so sometimes it pays to leave it the way it is. If it's a wide picture and it needs to be wide, I leave it. I don't take anything off. But there's a lot of other times, and in my case, probably most of the time, I do some cropping. I know there's some people out there that don't believe in that, but I do. So I crop to make the picture what I want it to be, because basically the camera has to have this shape. And if it's not something that fits that shape, and I can't do it in the camera when I'm taking the picture, then I'm going to crop it to make it work. So you'll see here I've got 5 different crops that I did. Here's the first one, here's the second one, here's the third one. Now we're getting sort of squarish. Didn't like that, so I kind of added a little bit back onto the left side, and I got rid of the two petals that were sticking in the top, and I've sort of gotten rid of some of the bud that's down at the bottom, but not all of it, because it's a little too close to the flower. You want to make sure there's no edges of the flower, unless you're going to do it totally. I mean, you could cut the whole side of the flower off if you're really concentrating on the center. But in this case, I wanted to see the whole flower, so I'm not going to make the edges so close to the flower that it looks like it's crowded too much. And in some respects, this right-hand side is maybe just a little too crowded, but we're going to leave it that way because that's how I initially did it. The next thing I added was a little vibrance, and this doesn't do much because I didn't use a whole lot. You have to be careful with vibrance because it works on colors that aren't in the saturation, and it really likes to make things blue. So it did kind of give a little bit more blue to this center section. And then I gave it a little bit, just a tad of saturation, a +5, which probably wasn't even necessary because I'm going to be taking this over into one of my favorite plugins, and that's going to really jack up the colors on this anyway. So the next thing I did was I went over into the HSL panel down here, and I like to use luminance a lot. And in this case, I shifted the green over to make it a little darker. As you can see, it's just a little bit darker, not a whole lot. You can go back. Here's the saturation line, and then the green. And then I also tried to darken up this. I was hoping I could darken up the background enough with this where I wouldn't need to go anyplace else, but it didn't work. So you start getting these too dark, it affects other colors as well. So you have to be careful about messing with the luminance too much. Then I usually do a little bit of sharpening over here in Lightroom because it actually does a pretty darn good job. And if you can see here, I'm going to hit the sharpening, and let's pull this down a little bit, and I've got it up to 101. I didn't really mess with the radius or the detail, but I do use the edge masking, and this is one of my favorite tools. Basically, when you use this, if you use the Option key, and I believe it's the Control key on your PC, you turn the picture into black and white, and you're really just affecting the outside lines. And so if you pull it way over here, you get everything's basically sharpening. It's masking to what you're sharpening. And so you really, in my case, in this particular flower, I really want the center sharp and the edges of the flowers as much as it can. As you can see, the lines there are pretty thick, so they're not going to be terribly sharp, but the lines in the center were pretty darn sharp. And as you can see, with the 100% blow up here over in the detail panel, it is pretty darn sharp. So I pretty much got everything done here that I want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this thing over into Photoshop, and we're going to go to Edit In and Photoshop. One of the many ways you can get things over to Photoshop, and it should come up pretty quick because Photoshop is open behind the Lightroom. Here it comes, and here's the picture in Photoshop. Now, first thing, one of the things on flowers that are, you kind of have to contend with pretty much across the board is the spots of dirt and bugs and pollen and all kinds of things, little places in the leaves where there's a little damage or something like that. This flower is actually pretty darn clean, but believe it or not, there's a lot of spots on this, and it's not terribly noticeable right now, but when we go into my favorite plugin, you'll see them. I actually, on the image that you saw in the slideshow, I used probably 20-30 minutes of processing to clean this flower up. And what I do is I zoom way in, and I go one little spot at a time, and I use my iPencil from Apple and my iPad Pro with a program called AstroPad, which actually puts Photoshop right on my iPad Pro, and I can actually get right down, and it's a little easier actually than I did it for many years with my mouse, and I'm really liking doing it with the iPencil. But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to forget about the fact that there's spots on this today, and we're just going to go ahead and process this. So the next thing I would do is I'm going to create a layer by Command J, and I believe it's Control J in PC. And it's been too long since I've had a PC, so I don't remember those things anymore. And I'm going to open up on one of the filters that I really, really like, and this is Topaz Glow. And you think, why is she going into glow for flowers? Because glow is weird if you've seen it. It's got all kinds of neon colors and crazy, crazy things. As you can see the presets opening over on the right-hand side, they are strange. Now, what you're seeing on the screen right now with the flower is one of my favorite presets, and that one is called Fur and Feathers. And we'll scroll down here because I have all the effects open right now. Sometimes it'll open and it'll just have a few of the effects, but I've made it so that it stays with all the effects so I can see what it's going to look like across the board. I mean, this one's really out there. That one's really strange. But anyway, we're not going to do that. Fur and Feathers 1 and 2 are my favorites. 3 is a little blurry. I occasionally use that if I want something soft, but it's a little too soft for me. I still want things to be pretty sharp. So Fur and Feathers 1 is like this. Fur and Feathers 2 is a little darker. And in this case, I want to use Fur and Feathers 2 because I'm trying to darken the background a little bit. And so this is what it looks like. It's kind of like an illustration when you use it to full effect. You can actually go in here, and there's sliders now. Let's see. I'll show you what you did. There's this little symbol in the middle of the preset that I'm clicking on right here. over on the right hand side, and that opens up the slider panels. And there are the primary glow, the secondary glow, there's color, there's finishing touches. I don't really use these that much. I may go in here and maybe take the brightness down a little bit if I think it's a little too bright. In this case, see it darkens it up a little bit. And so that's kind of giving me what I want in a way, but let's see what happens when we go and do a little bit more something. I'm going to brighten it up just a tad more so that yellow is bright. The other thing I use a lot over here, and I actually use more than the panels and the sliders, is over here on the left-hand side are the blend mode and the strength. And these are very similar to the blend mode and the opacity in layers in Photoshop. This one only has 6 choices. Normal is what you see here. Multiply makes it really, really dark, as you can see. Screen makes it light, which doesn't help us any because it kind of takes us back where we started. Overlay is probably the one I use the most. It's sort of a medium between normal and multiply. So it's not quite as dark, but it gives me the details that I'm looking for. So soft and hard light, I don't use too much. They don't show me too much difference in it. So overlay is what we're going to use on this one. And then I go to the strength slider and I move this down till I get to a point where I really like it. In this case, I think right around 30-35% is probably about right for what I'm looking for on this flower. Now we're going to go up here to the top where they have the original. You can see this was the original, which is kind of, it's okay, and it looked great over in Photoshop, but now that we've done this overlay, it's much richer. The colors are bolder. There's more lines noticeable that you couldn't really, some of them were kind of, blended in with the other petals, and this kind of boldens up everything, and basically what it's doing is increasing the contrast on the lines. But I've taken it down to such a low level that you really can't tell that it's glow that's doing this. There's a lot of glow being used out there in the world now. I see it on Facebook. I see it on Google Plus, and I can tell immediately that it's glow. What I want to do is I want the effect without it being known that it's glow that I'm using. And that's kind of where I am with this one. I don't think, you'd have to look pretty darn close to see that this thing is making all the little lines that glow is known for. So basically I think we're good where we are right now with this one. I'm going to take it back. I'm going to say okay. It's going to go back to Photoshop. And the reason why I use Photoshop is because there's the layers over here. I can do this in the plugin by itself. Just go straight from Lightroom into Topaz Glow. But that's not what I want to do. I want to have control over here on this layer if I need it. Now in this case, I think I'm good. I don't really feel like I need to mess around with this opacity. I mean, as you can see, I can pull it back if I want to. But I'm going for that really bright yellow color, bright purple, and I want the background to be dark. In fact, I want it so much dark, I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to go into my Nik software over here, and I'm going to use Darken and Lighten Center, which is in Color Effects Pro 4. One of the many filters in this particular Nik software plugin. And it opens up, because I picked it, it's one of my favorites, so it's right there. It opens up and the Darken and Lighten Center is right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on this Place Center, and I'm going to place it right over, to make sure it accepts it. It's got a little plus mark. I'm going to stick that right there, and you might have seen a small little change in the brightening of the center. As you can see here, I'm going to exaggerate it really. It gets really bright if you want to, or it gets really dark if you want it to get dark. But that's controlling the center luminosity. We don't want it quite that dark, so we're going to make it a little bit brighter in the center. That's pretty good. Now, the other slider here is the border slider, and this is where, I mean, you can brighten it up if you want to. It's kind of like a vignette, but I like this a lot better because you can place the center a little better, and you have control of the center as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to darken up the edges so that these green spots that were kind of light in the original, and these orangish spots that were from the bud that was behind this flower, are darker. And so this is, and you can also increase and decrease the size of the center if you want to. So you can figure out, how much of this center place you want brightened. There's other filters here, obviously, that I could add, but we're not going to do that today because that's not what we're doing. And we're going to go ahead and go back into, say OK, and go back into Photoshop. And this particular, the Nik software does create its own layer, so we don't have to create that ahead of time. And as you can see, now we have a third layer, which is Darken and Lighten Center, which is the Nik software. And so here we've got our flowers getting pretty darn close to where I had it initially. The only thing is I've got a couple of spots here that I want to maybe darken up a little bit. In this case, I'm going to use the burn tool just to get spotty things here that I want to get rid of. And I'm going to use the burn tool in Photoshop. And so I'm going to go over these. And if you click it and run over it and then unclick and click it again, and you can do this with your, I could do this with my pencil, but I'm trying to be quick here with this, and I'm going to use the mouse in this case since it's kind of big anyway, so it doesn't matter. And I click it, I run over it, and I unclick it, and then I do the same thing down here with this spot. Unclick, do it again, click again, and I keep doing this until I get the the darkness that I want. And this is kind of an extreme situation here where I've really darkened up the background. But I wanted this flower it's one of my favorite flowers. This is called an African painted daisy or an osteospermum. And they come in all different colors, blues and purples and pinks and peach. And this is a new variety that I've only seen a few times in my local nursery. And it's yellow with this purple center, and it's just kind of a cool flower. Yeah, I didn't create this. It's the process of my flowers. I also do this very similar type of post-processing to most of my other images. Not all of them, but a lot of them, especially the ones that I really want to pop out of the frame. So if you have any questions about using Topaz Glow on your flower pictures or any pictures, just let me know. This is Lynn Wizicki, the Illuminating Lens. Thank you so much for listening.